The night was quiet in a small village in northern Nigeria. The stars were shining above the dusty rooftops, and the air was calm, too calm. Inside a tiny church made of clay bricks and wooden benches, a few believers were singing softly. Their voices rose like light in the darkness. They sang, "Jesus, you are my refuge, even when the storm comes." Among them was a young boy named Emeka. He was only 12, but his heart burned with love for Jesus. Every Sunday, he came early to ring the bell that called everyone to prayer. That night, as he sat beside his mother and father, he felt something strange, like the air itself was whispering, "Pray." Suddenly, far away in the dark, the sound of engines roared. Motorcycles, many of them. Then came shouting, angry voices crying out things that made Emeka's heart beat fast. His father stood up, his face pale. He whispered, "They are coming." Everyone knew what that meant. It was Boko Haram, the men who hated Christians, who burned churches and shouted that no one should follow Jesus. The pastor quickly said, "Everyone, kneel down. Pray. Don't run. Pray." As the motorcycles came closer, their headlights cut through the night like knives. Emeka could see the dust rising behind them. He heard the click of guns, the sound of metal against metal, and then, boom. The door was kicked open. Men in dark clothes stormed in, their faces covered. One of them shouted, "Where is your Jesus now?" They began smashing chairs, breaking windows, and pouring something from bottles. The smell filled the room. It was petrol. Emeka held his mother's hand tight. She whispered with tears, "Jesus, protect us." One man struck a match. For a moment, time stopped. The little yellow flame flickered, dancing in his hand. Then, with a laugh, he threw it on the floor. The petrol caught fire in seconds. The walls began to burn, red and orange flames crawling upward, smoke filling the air. The heat was unbearable. People screamed. Some tried to run, but the door was blocked. "Close your eyes and pray." The pastor cried, "Do not fear. Jesus is here." Emeka fell to his knees, coughing. He couldn't breathe. His skin felt hot, and his ears rang with the sound of crackling fire. Everything around him was burning. The floor, the benches, even the Bible on the altar. And then, something incredible happened. Through the thick smoke, Emeka saw a bright light, not from the fire, but from above. It was like a white flame, pure and shining, but it didn't burn. The light grew stronger until it filled the whole church. The men outside stopped shouting. Some dropped their guns. The fire, which had been roaring, suddenly slowed, then began to die down, as if invisible hands were putting it out. The believers looked around in shock. The fire had stopped at the walls, leaving the people untouched. The petrol bottles were empty, but the flames had refused to cross a line that seemed drawn by heaven itself. Emeka looked up. In that moment, he saw something, or someone, standing in the light. It was a man in white, his face gentle but powerful, his eyes full of fire that did not destroy, but protected. And a voice echoed softly through the room, "I am with you, even in the fire." When Emeka blinked, the light faded. The men outside ran into the darkness, shouting in fear, "There is power in that place." The church was filled with smoke, but no one was burned. Not a single person. Emeka's father whispered, trembling. Jesus came. And that night, the people of the little village knew that no matter how dark the world became, the fire of hatred could never destroy the light of Christ. The next morning, the village was filled with whispers. Everyone had heard what happened at the little church, how fire came, but no one was burned. People gathered around the church, staring in disbelief. The walls were black with smoke. The windows were broken. The roof had holes, but the cross that stood above the church was still shining, clean and untouched. Old Mama Grace, who lived nearby, shook her head. "I saw the fire with my own eyes," she said. "The flames were higher than the trees. I thought everyone inside had died." But then she saw Emeka and his parents walk out, holding their Bibles, singing softly. "Jesus, you are my light." Tears filled her eyes. "It's a miracle," she whispered. By noon, people from other villages started coming to see for themselves. Some brought cameras. Others just stood quietly, touching the church walls, feeling the heat marks that still remained. One man, a Muslim named Abdullahi, spoke with trembling hands. "I was one of them," he confessed. We came to burn this church. But when the fire started, I saw a man in white standing inside. The fire wouldn't touch him. It scared me. I dropped my gun and ran. The pastor looked at him gently. That man was Jesus, he said. Abdullahi fell to his knees. If that was Jesus, he said, then I want to know him. That day, many hearts changed. The same people who once mocked the believers began to ask questions. Some cried, some prayed. Meanwhile, Emeka walked inside the church. The air still smelled of smoke. The Bible that had been on the altar was covered in ash, but when he picked it up, the pages were perfectly clean. Not even one page was burned. He opened it, and the first words his eyes saw were, "When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, for I am with you." Isaiah 43:2. His heart jumped. He ran to the pastor and shouted, "Sir, look what Jesus wrote for us." The pastor smiled with tears. That's his promise, Emeka. And he just kept it. That night, as the sun went down, the whole village gathered outside the church. They sang louder than ever before. The fire that was meant to destroy them had instead lit up their faith. The same place that burned with hate now burned with hope. And far away, in the darkness, the men who had fled couldn't stop thinking about what they saw, a fire that obeyed a voice greater than theirs. That voice was Jesus. Far away, deep inside the forest, Abdullahi couldn't sleep. The memory of that night kept replaying in his mind, the moment he saw the man in white standing in the middle of the fire. He could still hear the sound of crackling flames, the shouting of his men, and the way the fire stopped like it had met something stronger. Who was that man? He whispered into the dark. For years, Abdullahi had been taught that Christians were enemies. He thought burning churches would please God. But what he saw that night shook everything he believed. He had seen fearless fire, and yet it had bowed down before a single name, Jesus. 3 days later, Abdullahi gathered his courage and walked back to the village. The people saw him coming and stepped back in fear. Some hid behind doors, but Emeka's pastor came forward. "Peace be with you," the pastor said softly. Abdullahi knelt down, his eyes full of tears. "I came to destroy," he said, "but your Jesus destroyed my hate." Everyone watched as this man, once an enemy, began to cry like a child. Emeka ran to bring him water. The pastor placed a hand on his shoulder and prayed, "Lord Jesus, show him your mercy." That day, Abdullahi gave his life to Christ. From then on, he told everyone what he saw. He went to nearby towns and said, "I was there when the fire burned, but Jesus was stronger than the fire." People listened with open mouths. Some didn't believe him, but others did, especially when they visited the church and saw the blackened walls and the untouched Bible. News began to spread fast, through villages, through cities, even reaching reporters. They called it, the fire that wouldn't burn. And everywhere Abdullahi went, he carried a small wooden cross around his neck, a sign that his heart now belonged to the same man he once tried to erase. One evening, Emeka found him sitting by the church door, looking up at the sky. "Do you still see the man in white sometimes?" Emeka asked. Abdullahi smiled. "Yes," he said, "not with my eyes, but with my heart. He's here, in every light that shines when darkness tries to win." The boy nodded, his heart warm. That night, as the village slept, the little church stood tall under the stars, a silent witness that Jesus' power is real, even in the middle of fire. By the next week, everyone in the region was talking about the miracle fire. Some called it impossible, others said it was fake. But those who were there, Emeka, his parents, the pastor, and Abdullahi, knew what they saw. Soon, a group of journalists arrived from the city. They came with cameras, notebooks, and questions. They looked around the burned church, touching the walls, taking pictures of the half-melted metal doors. But when one of them saw the Bible, the one that hadn't burned, he froze. "Who put this here?" he asked. The pastor replied, "No one. It was here all along, on the altar. The fire touched everything but this." The journalist turned the pages. Every single one was clean, white, and perfect. His hands shook as he whispered, this shouldn't be possible." He looked at the verse written in bold at the top of one page. "The Lord is my refuge and my strength." By evening, pictures of the church were everywhere, on phones, on the internet, on television. Headlines read, Fire fails to burn church in Nigeria. Miracle or mystery. Across the country, people argued. Some laughed and said it was luck. Others cried, saying it was proof that Jesus still saves. Meanwhile, the little village that was once afraid began to shine with joy. Many who had left because of Boko Haram's attacks started returning. The church was rebuilt, this time with stronger walls, a metal roof, and a new name painted on the front. The fire that Jesus stopped. When they held their first service after the attack, the church was so full that people stood outside the doors. Abdullahi was there too, standing in front with tears in his eyes. He said to the crowd, "I came with hate, but Jesus met me with love. I saw his power with my own eyes." As he spoke, many wept. Even the soldiers guarding the village bowed their heads. Then Emeka stepped forward, holding the unburned Bible. He raised it high and said, "Fire tried to destroy this book, but Jesus protected it. If he can protect his word, he can protect us too." The people shouted, "Amen," so loudly that it echoed through the hills. That night, the stars above the village seemed brighter than ever. Some said they saw a faint white glow hovering above the church, a gentle reminder of that night when fire met faith, and faith won. Far away, in homes across Nigeria, people who had lost hope began to pray again. The story touched hearts, healed wounds, and reminded everyone that darkness can never win when Jesus stands in the fire. In a small village in northern Nigeria, Boko Haram militants attacked a church, setting it on fire while believers prayed inside. But instead of being consumed by flames, the people witnessed a miracle. The fire stopped as a bright light filled the church, and no one was harmed. Among the witnesses was Emeka, a young boy whose faith grew stronger after seeing Jesus' power. One of the attackers, Abdullahi, also saw a man in white standing in the fire and later gave his life to Christ. Summary: news of the event spread across Nigeria, shocking the nation. The untouched Bible and the unburned believers became symbols of faith that no flame could destroy. The same fire meant to silence them became a story that set hearts on fire for Jesus all over the country. Moral lesson: no fire, no hatred, and no evil can destroy those who stand with Jesus. His power is greater than every storm, and his light always wins over darkness. The end.